Kelly. Today I'm going to be doing an in-depth bookshelf tour, and that means I'm going to be going through every book that's on the bookshelves behind me, and I'm going to be reading the short little blurb that it gives you either on the back or on the inside cover, whichever it has, being paperback or hardback. So yeah, let's go right ahead and jump right in. Okay, the first shelf that I'm going to do is this one right back here. This has just a few Reader's Digest books, and they're from the 1960s and 1970s. They used to be my grandpa's, but he died, and so we've just kept them because I really like them. They're really pretty, and each one has, I think, 3 or 4 different stories in it. The first one I'm going to be talking about is this one. It looks like that. Look how pretty these covers are. These covers are really cool, and that's one of the reasons that I kept them. The other reason is I just kind of want to read all of these little stories. The first one is called Lone Woman by Dorothy Clark Wilson. In 1849, Elizabeth Blackwell became the first woman graduate of an American medical school. Her achievement was dramatic, not only because of the obstacles she faced, but also because of the surprising turn of fate which led her to study medicine. For although she believed in the right of women to be educated, the idea of becoming a doctor was unthinkable to her. She hated illness and could scarcely bear to be in a sick room. Then a close family friend, dying of cancer, told her of the added suffering she had had to endure through the distress of being examined and treated by a man. And Elizabeth experienced compassion akin to a calling. What could be more challenging, more all-consuming? So began a struggle with herself as well as with a society that insisted woman's place was in the home. Today, Elizabeth Blackwell is gratefully remembered as the founder of the New York Infirmary, an institution which stands as a memorial to one woman with the courage to fulfill a most unusual destiny. The second book in this Reader's Digest is The Homecoming by Earl Hammer Jr. All the Spencer family had was their home in legend-rich mountain country and each other. Yet most of the time, their lives shone with the joy of living. But now, on the eve of Christmas, something was surely wrong. Olivia's special feeling for the season had not come to lighten her burdens and gladden her heart. There were no presents except for those she'd managed to make herself for her 8 children. And although her husband was taking his own sweet time getting home, Olivia was certain not even a blizzard would keep Clay Spencer from his family on Christmas Eve. As the night deepens and the promise of Christmas seems ever more remote, the Spencers learn that miracle, like love, sometimes shines brightest when no one's looking. Next is Papillon by Henry Charriere, Charriere, and there's a little thing over the first E. I don't know, it's French. I'm not good with French. Few men could have survived, and maybe it's Henri Charriere's searing adventure. Certainly no other man could have written it. In 1931, he was condemned to life imprisonment for a murder of which he claimed to be innocent. During the next 14 years, he escaped repeatedly from grim jungle prisons. Now living in exile in Venezuela, Papillon, as he was called in the underworld, has written his story. Its value does not rest on its sensational appeal as the autobiography of a convict, but rather on its rare authenticity as one man's testament of his unrelenting quest for freedom. It is a harsh yet compassionate story infused with a rugged morality and sense of life which will not soon be forgotten. Next, we have Whitewater by Paul Horgan. The young people of Belvedere, Texas, knew their time was golden and endless. Life was best when they dared the most, and love made all things possible. Their elders knew that nothing abides forever, there was no courage without wisdom, and love may fail both the loving and the loved. To Phil, Marilee, and Billy, their hometown was the world. Their exuberance awakened the hopes and aroused the spirits of all who knew them. And in their youthful need to know all of life, they lived fully, perhaps too soon. The last book in this Reader's Digest is The Unexpected Mrs. Paulifax by Dorothy Gilman. Mrs. Virgil Emily Paulifax of New Brunswick, New Jersey, had to admit that the young CIA man did seem a bit startled by her idea, yet she could see no good reason why she shouldn't become a secret agent. She was widowed, her children grown and married, she was weary of garden club meetings, and besides, no one in his right mind would ever suspect her of anything sinister. At first there was official resistance to her plan, but fate joined her one-woman conspiracy and she found herself with an assignment. So begins a delightful tale of suspense in which everything, almost, inevitably goes wrong. Soon the CIA, as well as the enemy, has every cause to wish that Emily Polifax had stayed at home and left both sides to fight the Cold War in peace. The next book on that shelf looks like this. These covers, I just love these covers. The first book in this one is called The Two of Us by Claude Berry. Everyone who has seen the movie knows the story. The parents of a 9-year-old Jewish boy take him from Paris and finally send him to the country to save him from the Nazis. He lives with a family, one of whose members is an old man named Pepe, an anti-Semite. In the end, the boy and Pepe exchange the precious gift of love. Or does everyone know the story? It takes place during World War II, yes, but it isn't a war story. I wonder if it is really a Jewish story. Pepe doesn't like Jews. Many of his opinions are outrageous, but he does come to love best that which he imagines he hates the worst. The young boy does not change Pepe's life because he is Jewish. He changes Pepe's life because he is young. Pepe teaches him things about the countryside, lessons he would never have learned in Paris. As Pepe enriches the young boy's life, so does the young boy enrich Pepe's. There is one secret between them, and that is that the boy is Jewish. I think the young boy keeps the secret because he does not want the old man to be ashamed of himself, to be disappointed in himself. Pepe is capable of a vast love, and probably the young boy knows that Pepe would discover that he wouldn't be much of an anti-Semite anyway, not when the chips are down, not when love is at stake. This, then, is the story of a reciprocal reverence that often exists between the young and the old. Since it is only from examples that the young learn, the old must set a good example. Yet often it is the young who teach the most valuable of all lessons. Life does not go on forever, but the young think it does. They think there is all the time in the world for love and promise and meaning. And of course, they are right. The next book is Bishu the Jaguar by Alan Caillou. A trapper stands on the bank of a wild tropical river. In the vivid jungle, he sees a jaguar move. He raises his gun, fires, and the great cat disappears. Severely wounded, Bishu hides in the shadow-filled forest. As the first terrible shock fades, her every action is governed by one instinct. If she is to die, it must be among the familiar trees and rocks of her mountain cave, many days' journey away. An Indian called Urubelava, the stubborn one, has come to the great river with his young daughter Marina to count rubber trees. When they find Bishu's tracks, Urubelava swears to hunt down the jaguar for its valuable skin. Upon this triumph, he stakes his honor as a man and as a father. But for Marina, the excitement of the hunt soon turns to unspeakable fear. New and strange emotions threaten her loyalty to her father. She has looked into the eye of the jaguar and seen beauty. Throughout the drama of the chase, the powerful jungle casts its own fantastic spell until hunter and hunted are at last brought face to face. And in that rare, intense confrontation, something of the essence of life itself is revealed. The next book is The Minister by Charles Mercer. The Reverend Martin Judson and his wife Jane drive into Upton, Pennsylvania, where he had accepted his first pastoral call. He had the impulse to keep right on going. He would drive out of the smog and the dismal rain and head for Florida and sunshine. "I'll walk the beach with you, and that is all we'll ever do," he said to Jane. But Upton claimed the Judson family, and there they began to learn the meaning of service to God, the church, and their fellow man. The difficult problems of faith, morality, and the vigorous dissension of the young in our changing society are important concerns in this invigorating contemporary novel. It is the story of life lived as the Judson family must live, engaged by the problems which beset our time. The next one is Mayo, The Story of My Family and My Career by Dr. Charles W. Mayo. Charles W. Mayo performed his first surgery at the age of 10. The patient was a sick puppy. The operation an unqualified success. This earlier medical debut, the formidable self-confidence it required, and the gift for healing are all in the Mayo family tradition. Dr. Mayo's book is the story of his remarkable family as only a Mayo could tell it. There are fascinating anecdotes about his colorful grandfather, who had to fight Indians in order to make a house call and who eventually founded the Mayo Clinic. There are candid stories of Dr. Mayo's famous father and uncle who built the clinic into the world-renowned institution for group practice it is today. And there are charming portraits of the women who shared the energetic and sometimes tragic lives of these extraordinary men. It is a heritage remembered justly with pride and humanely told with wit and affection. Next is Torre Greca by Anne Cornelison. Torre Greca is an ancient, remote Italian hill town. Although its people once were uneducated, poor, and hungry, they were also determined not to change their ways. Then into their midst came a compassionate, capable young American woman determined to change them. The result? First suspicion and anger on one side, frustration and doubt on the other. Slowly, a remarkable bishop, a dedicated local doctor, and a loyal peasant woman helped ease the difficult problems. And at last, with the opening of a nursery and model village, there is now new hope for hundreds of children, new ways of living for their parents. Today, Anne Cornelison has become a legend in southern Italy. But, above all, in this book there is a lesson for everyone who would deal with problems of poverty, fear, and resentment on our own doorsteps. For they are problems resolved only by patience, person to person, not only in Torre Greca, but here in America too. The last one in this book is April Morning by Howard Fast. As the British troops rode out of the mist of morning on the 20th of April, 1775, the men and boys of Lexington stood to confront them on the town's common. From his place in the ranks, 15-year-old Adam Cooper could see his house and the houses of his neighbors. He knew that behind the closed and barred shutters, those he loved, his mother, his grandmother, and his brother Levi, anxiously watched. Suddenly, as the spokesman for the colonists prepared to speak to their grievances, the unthinkable happened. Guns fired and bayonets flashed in the morning light. War burst around them. This is the unforgettable story of our first patriots. It is about their daily lives and their courage, their humor and their sense of honor. It is only the portrait of one boy's coming of age, of his first knowledge of love and death, and of his struggle to triumph over his own youth. April Morning is stirring and forthright and has won the hearts of many readers. It is well on its way to becoming an American classic. The next book on the shelf looks like this. The first one in this book is Miss 1000 Spring Blossoms by John Ball. Richard Seaton's sojourn in Japan was meant to be a simple business trip. Instead, the shy New England bachelor found himself caught in the enchanted spell of Tokyo's #1 geisha, Miss 1000 Spring Blossoms, and, all unknowingly, entangled in the bewildering traditions of the age-old geisha system. In the web of misunderstandings, Seaton's business friends at Matsumoto and Company, who had become his personal friends as well, were almost bankrupt, and Seaton himself felt that his naive heart was broken. But before this tender and understanding novel reaches its unexpected ending, East and West are drawn a little closer, and readers are given new insights into Japan and into the hearts of people everywhere. The second book in here is The Hurricane Years by Cameron Hawley. Judd Weiler opened his eyes and saw the misty outline of an oxygen tent. Terror gripped him. Then it was true. He had had a heart attack. But Judd could not know that he was in the care of a man who would not only save his life, but change it. Dr. Aaron Carr had always maintained that an important cause of an under 50 coronary was the stress encountered in middle age, the hurricane years, when tiring men may drive themselves blindly toward no clear, rewarding goals. The heart attack victim, Carr believed, must be made to think deeply about his own life to assure permanent recovery. Patiently and gently, the physician probed into hidden reasons for Judd's attack. With his guidance, Judd and his embittered wife, Kay, fought free of the tensions that had shadowed their lives and found their way to a new plane of love and understanding. The next one is The Wine and the Music by William E. Barrett. For Father Gregory Lind, the love of Christ was no longer enough. A dedicated, devout priest, he still felt himself a part of the church which had been his whole life. But the vow of chastity which he had taken with sincerity and kept with conviction seemed almost irrelevant when he met Pamela Gibson and found in her the other half of himself. Hers was a love which made him a more complete person, but which led inescapably to a shattering confrontation between Gregory Lind, the man, and Father Lind, the priest. In The Wine and the Music, William E. Barrett has put in dramatic human perspective one of the most troubling problems of the Catholic Church today. Next one is On Reflection by Helen Hayes with Sanford Doty. Some 60 years ago, a little girl climbed aboard a dusty train with her mother in Washington, D.C., her goal nothing less than a career on the Broadway stage. That career is now legendary, but the Helen Hayes who, in private life, has met tragedy and happiness with equal grace is here revealed with amazing candor for the first time. This is the story of a touching childhood, of a madly unsuitable romance which became a stormy but devoted marriage, of the joys and humors and sorrows of motherhood, of many entertaining friends and some of the most beguiling poodles ever to take over a family. As it turned out, the little girl who boarded the long-ago train found much more than a stage career awaiting her. The riches she uncovered, both in happiness and heartbreak, shine from Helen Helen Hayes' pen. It is a pleasure to welcome her to these pages. And the last one is The Black Ship by Paul and Sheila Mandel. She ruled the North Sea like an evil queen, eluding the British Navy and the RAF, the German destroyer Horst Wessel, and her sinister SS crew. When the likable young American ensign James Craig took his PT boat out against the Black Ship, his boat and most of his crew vanished in one tragic blast. The stricken, shaken Craig made it to the beach and was hidden by Dutch resistance people in Groenhaven, a seaport most often used by the Black Ship. Craig's fear and hatred for the Wessel turned into passionate anger as he saw the brutality with which the SS men treated Groenhaven, and anger endorsed an outrageously audacious scheme by which Craig and a few others planned to blow up the ship. High adventure and a delicious spice of humor make Paul and Sheila Mandel's The Black Ship one of the most absorbing and engaging suspense stories of the year. Okay, I think I'm going to split this up into 2 parts because since there are 6 books on this first shelf, I can have 3 on each video, and it's going to be super long either way, but otherwise it's going to be like an hour long, and that's just way too long for a video, so I'm just going to settle for about half an hour. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope some of these stories sounded good to you. If they did, then let me know if you plan to read them, or if you have already read them, or maybe your parents have read them and told you about them, I don't know. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will see you in the next installment of this bookshelf. Sometime I'll get around to uploading it, I don't know, but I'll see you guys later. Bye!